Hey guys, I was at Anime Boston in the Artist Alley earlier this year, so here's some behind the scenes of me solo vending at one of East Coast's biggest anime cons. The convention is 3 days long from Friday to Sunday, so I took a red-eye flight on Wednesday to give myself time to set up on Thursday. So here you can see I packed my suitcases both perfectly at 49 pounds each. This con was pretty expensive for me to attend as an artist coming in from the West Coast. So the red-eye flight was about $840, and I had 2 checked bags in both directions, and so that added up to another $140. I landed in Boston at 7 a.m. the next morning. It was raining, and I took a taxi to my hotel. I am soloing this convention, and my usual artist friends I share my hotel with didn't make it, so I booked a hotel that was physically attached to the area that the convention was at for safety and convenience reasons. So unfortunately that means the hotel was super expensive. It was like $1,000 for 3 nights. So I just deadlifted, I guess, about 70 pounds worth of merch from the FedEx office. But now I'm in the hotel. They got me an early check-in room, which is nice. But it has, can you see? It has 2 queen beds. I'm a single person. I originally booked a single king-sized bed, but whatever. And I'm just opening up my merch. I had them shipped directly to the convention from my printer, so it's exciting. I think hopefully these will do well at the con. It's the first time I've had them at a con. It's actually the first time I've been at Anime Boston since before the pandemic. And the last time I was here, I was in the Pro Row tables, which are like 2 feet bigger, and it has like a 50-50 fan art to original ratio. But I really don't know like how that compares to the regular tables, so we'll see. I'll find out. I just ran into another artist at the FedEx office who was super nice, and she told me that apparently after the pandemic it's been better, like overall, so hopefully that'll stay the same, but gotta keep unpacking. I think in general, most medium to large size cons have gotten better in terms of sales after the pandemic, and I think this is because there are more fans. There are a lot of people that got into anime over the pandemic that I think are now starting to attend conventions. Of course, this increase in sales isn't true for all cons. I usually do data analysis on my convention numbers over the years, and I found that attendee count on its own is a pretty inaccurate way of estimating how much money you'll make at a particular con. Instead, the number of attendees divided by the number of artists in the Artist Alley seems to be much more useful. So, of course, there are a lot of other factors that determine any artist's estimated revenue, but what I mean is if there is one con I made a particular amount of money at, if I go to a convention that is twice as many attendees, but the Artist Alley is also twice as large, then I would estimate to sell about the same amount of money at both of these conventions. So the plot on the right here shows my revenue versus my multiplier, aka the attendee count divided by the number of artists in the alley. And you can see that it's actually pretty linear from year to year. So with the blue dots signifying older cons I did before the pandemic and the red dots being the more recent cons, you can sort of see that my sales have been steadily increasing over the years. So while most cons seem to be better after the pandemic, there are some cons that have massively increased the number of artists in their alley, and it makes sales overall for all the artists a little worse. I got brunch at Luke's Lobster. We don't have these on the West Coast, so I always like to treat myself to a lobster roll. I like to splurge a little bit more on my food when I go to conventions, so you'll see me not hold back much on the food. After brunch, I headed to the absolutely beautiful Boston Central Library next to the Prudential Center. The badge pickup for the con doesn't start until 3 p.m. and Artist Alley setup was actually not until 7 p.m. so I didn't take Thursday off. It's one of the reasons why I took a red eye, so I had one whole day in Boston where I could prep for the con, but also still didn't have to take an extra day off of work. I do think that there are a lot more artists who rely on art as their main source of income now compared to pre-pandemic, but I like my day job, so I do art on a part-time basis. I think that the fact there are more artists relying on artist alleys as their income is also related to the kind of controversial topic on social media about how many of the artist alley booths now seem to offer very similar items. And I think this is because more artists are now caring about their bottom line because they have to, it's their livelihood. The demographic of anime con artists has evolved a bit from what it was maybe 5 to 10 years ago, which was mostly college kids or folks doing artwork on the side, to now, which is like full-on businesses. So many artists actually still have a lot of niche items, but the reality is that a lot of this does get overlooked by a large portion of the attendees, especially because I think there are more casual anime fans now compared to pre-pandemic. I was trying to consolidate my boxes and my suitcase into something that is easier to bring to the con. I feel like it's getting worse. I started setting up at 8 p.m. after my day job. It took me longer than usual to set up because I completely forgot my grid connectors and had to borrow a bunch from a friend and then tie the rest together with zip ties. The Artist Alley at Anime Boston is set up with several square islands with artists all along the outer walls as well. So there were a little under 200 artists this year, which is pretty small for a convention of this attendee size. And I think it's one of the reasons why it's so difficult to get into this con. The other reason why this con is so hard to get into is because Anime Boston's standard tables are lottery. It used to be first come first serve, but I think it was relatively recently updated to lottery. Back in the day, many cons used to be first come first serve because it meant that people who really wanted to go to the con and signed up right away would have a better shot at attending the con. But the number of artist applications in recent years have been shooting up, and it causes technical issues and a lot of stress on everybody during the first come first serve sign up process. So more and more cons have started to move away to either be lottery or full jury. Personally, I do prefer these methods over first come first serve just because I'm too old for the stress that it brings, but I do have to admit that juried apps and lottery apps especially are difficult to get accepted into because there's only so much you can do. I do think it's gotten much harder in general to get into cons after the pandemic, and I think that's because there are a lot more artists in the Artist Alley scene than compared to before. So there's a lot of reasons. I think a lot of it comes down to artists who built their repertoire and their skills over the pandemic, or maybe folks who had a career change. Whatever the reasons are, I would say there's a lot of artists, and in addition, the artists who have been around for a while, the veterans, are now also applying for more conventions because it's so hard to get into some of the cons that we are applying to backup cons because having some con is better than having no con at all. Okay, day one. It's now day one. Here's Boston. It's actually 9:30. Setup has already started at 9, so I'm a little bit late, but I set up, I planned out my prints and everything last night, so I think I know exactly where things are gonna go. It just needs to get done. The convention is held in the Prudential Center, which is an interesting indoor conglomerate made up of a mall, the Prudential Tower of Offices, the Sheraton, and the Heinz Convention Center. The last two is where the convention is actually held. And it's also attached to the Copley Place, which is another mall with an attached hotel, which is where I was staying. I really like it because everything is right there and it's super convenient. Morning of day one, I had a little bit more to set up. I tried to prep the night before by mapping out all of my prints, but unfortunately I didn't quite finish before the convention opened at 11 a.m. So here's what my table looked like once it had finished later in the day. There was a massive 2-hour-long rush right when the convention opened, and between the customers coming in and me trying to finish my setup, I didn't sit for a good chunk of that morning. The alley was packed all day, but there was constant staff with security presence, and I could tell that they were trying their best to keep the traffic moving for safety. It was going so well that I actually started running a little low on stock halfway through the day, so I closed the shop for a bit to go back to my hotel room to pick up some extra stock I had set aside for the remainder of the convention, and also grab some boba on the way back. And honestly, that little midday break made a huge difference because the con has pretty long hours and it can get really exhausting. Hello! Day one of Anime Boston is a wrap. My friends and I ordered some food for dinner, and unfortunately, even though my friend had specifically asked for utensils, we didn't get them, so I couldn't eat my dinner. So right now, it's 9 o'clock, finally eating my dinner. I will say the staff at Anime Boston have been great. They constantly make announcements that are very loud and very clear. There's congestion in the back, please keep moving, etc., etc. But also, I think they realized how bad it was getting in the back row. So they actually they pushed back all of the artists' tables a little bit, like backwards a little, so the pathways could be enlarged. Is that a word? I was just really impressed that they had such a clear kind of understanding of what was going around in the artist alley, and also the organization to be able to make changes to that. So also the artist alley head, I believe, the one that is making all of the intercoms, she's so nice. In one of her announcements said that we didn't have to be there the entirety of the time, and she was saying if you want, you can get up, you can leave early, which I feel like is very different from most artist alleys. I don't know if I noticed it before the last time when I came here, but I know there are many cons that are you have to be there during the entirety of the opening of the artist alley, otherwise you get blacklisted. So I just started doing the numbers, and I can confidently say that I've made back all my costs, which is great because this con was pretty expensive for me to attend. Thank you, everybody, who came to Anime Boston. I am in the green. I can feed myself. Good morning. Boston Day 2. Woo! Day 2 was overall about the same business as Day 1 in the Artist Alley. It did seem like the traffic jam in the back was doing a lot better than Day 1, which was a relief. Unfortunately, I really didn't get to browse around because I didn't have any helpers, which is a bummer because everyone's stuff looked really great. I think in the last 5 years, folks have really started to amp up the quality of their physical merch. I remember when I first started, people still had laminated paper keychains, and buttons were kind of the big thing because of how simply they could be made. But nowadays, folks have everything from really intricate pins to custom apparel, which is a lot of fun to see, but I do worry a little that new artists will feel like the bar to start Artist Alley is really high now, even though you really can still do great with just paper items like prints and stickers. I took a lunch break in the afternoon and went to a little bakery called Tat for some delicious toast. I decided I could splurge a little because I had already made back all of my costs, but I did find out later that some folks were waiting for me at the table, so I'm so sorry if I missed you during this time. Day 2 is usually the longest day, so afterwards I treated myself to some really nice udon with friends, which I totally forgot to film, but it was delicious. Very much today, but that is a wrap for day 2 of Anime Boston. Sales wise, it was great. I think this con is just like my other cons in that I generally do better on Fridays. It's weird. Most artists I've talked to, they're like Saturdays, they're kind of biggest seller. For me, it's almost always a Friday. I don't know if it's because by Saturday I'm running out of stuff. This con was no different in that my Friday was still better, not by like, I don't know, outrageous amount or anything. It was still a very solid day. It was just a little bit less, I think, than yesterday. I haven't done like my full counts yet, so I don't know for sure. Tonight, I'm just gonna take it easy, go to bed, and then tomorrow I'm checking out of the hotel. I left all my suitcases at the Artist Alley anyway, so I'm just going to, I have my backpack, and I have like a little tote thing, and I'm just gonna stick my clothes in there, and then fly home directly from the convention center when it's done. Day 3 is always the slowest day for me. Usually my biggest sellers are sold out at this point and folks have started to head home for the weekend, but there were still a lot of people who stopped by even just to chat about some of the more niche fandoms, which is always fun because I don't get to see much of that online. I was trying to tear down quickly to catch a flight, so I totally forgot to film it, but I did manage to fit everything back into my 3 suitcases, and that was it for Anime Boston. I had my regular day job the next morning, so I spent the flight back mostly relaxing, got home back a little bit past midnight on the West Coast. After running some numbers, my direct profit for this convention came to about $7,500. However, about a third of my revenue goes to the cost of making and packaging my merchandise, so my true profits come down to an estimated $4,000. It's a solid profit, and all of it is going to my costs for my next convention, which is Anime Expo. So that convention cost me nearly $4,000 to attend last year, including the cost of helpers, but not including the cost of my merchandise. So while revenue numbers seem like a lot at first glance, you can start to see how much upfront cost I actually needed in order to make this a success for me. There are definitely places I can lower costs, but being a part-time artist, I try to minimize the stress and retain my stamina, since I do have a limited amount of time and energy outside of my day job to do this. It is a lot of work, and frankly, it's not as profitable per hour as my day job, but I do it because I love making the artwork and going to cons and meeting people. And that's it for my journey to Anime Boston's Artist Alley. I hope folks found this informative, and if you did visit me at Anime Boston, thank you so much. Your support lets me keep doing this, so thank you.